Hello and good evening to those in India and for those joining us from elsewhere. I hope you're having a great day. Welcome to the fifth edition of our webinar series where we host conversations with leaders of communications on issues that are contemporary and affect the reputation management profession at large. We are very excited to be hosting such leaders today to talk to us about what we have learned from this adversity. We have Ameer Ismail from Golinopinion. We have Madhu Chhibber from Madison PR. We have Mukesh Kharbanda from Fuzion PR. We have Minal from Ideosphere Consulting, Rekha from Zeno Group, Udit Pathak from Media Mantra, and a special thanks to Resham Chabra of Nestaway for moderating this conversation. Uh, Almost 200 participants have signed up for this talk, and it's being broadcast live on our Facebook page. So, our colleagues, and you can see at the bottom of your screen. And if you're watching this on Facebook, please, you can put the questions in the comments, and we'll try our best to have it raised to the panel. With that, I want to hand it over the conversation to Resham. Resham, over to you.
Sure. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much, everybody who's joined us from different corners of the world. Thank you, all the PR leaders who have taken time out to speak to us. And the topic is adversity and what do we learn from adversity, learning from adversity. So this is once in a lifetime event that we are seeing. In 160 years, the Indian Railways has shut down. This tells us the volume, the intensity of the problem and the crisis that we are in today. So the session is divided into 40 to 50 minutes of discussion. Every question that is posed to you, I would want all of you to at least take a minute or two to answer the question, and then we can discuss it around. I'll call your name and you can start the conversation. It is structured in a format where we are trying to cover all the four key stakeholders in our industry, because our industry is very intertwined within each other. We will start with the end consumer, and all of us are end consumers in one manner or the other. It will be followed by what are you seeing as media trends that we should look out for, what are your learnings in adversity that media is doing. We will go back to the brands that you're so closely working and are associated with. And finally, we will talk about all of your consultancies. What are your learnings from your peers, from your teams that you're implementing, that you will also implement post the COVID scare is over. So my first question would be that, and I will start with you, Madhu, that how closely do you think the key stakeholders, as in the end consumers, are going to change the behavior pattern when it comes down to going out and shopping? Because what was predicted before was there will be a revenge shopping once everything is over. But looking at China and other markets, that does not seem to be the case. So what is the behavioral change that you see that is going to impact us in the near future from a consumer point of view? And if you can give us some examples, we will start with you, please. Madhu?
Hi, Resham and everyone online. Thank you for having me on the panel. Okay, so Resham, I see myself as I'm putting myself in the shoes of a consumer, because people, and naturally us as consumers, we've experienced what I think can be broadly called as a shock phase to start with. Initial days of trying to understand what's descended on us, what will be functional, what will not be functional, what is essential items. And I think what we've currently moved into is the disruption phase, where the normal rhythm of life has totally changed, which over a period of time, it's going to change our outlook, purchase pattern, purchase sentiment, which brings me to the question you've asked. I think consumers will continue to pick availability over loyalty. This is happening situationally, because let me give an example. For example, some brands like Procter & Gamble, Nivea, which otherwise you would go to a regular store, a department store to go and purchase your personal care products, are now going to be available and delivered by aggregators like Swiggy and Zomato. Now, how different is that from the world we knew? Consumers are being experimental. Me as a consumer, we go and try new brands when we don't find our favorite brands. I mean, if we try and look at where our favorite noodle brand is, we don't find one, we're going to try the new one. And then that starts a new journey of consumer trial and loyalty, if we like what that brand has to offer. I think that also brings me to wearing the communication hat. Consumer innovation and compassion in compassionate way in which the brands are going to be communicating, empathetic communication, as opposed to, like a push sell, is something that the consumer is sort of conscious of. Brands that will continue to need to show their human face for greater relatability by the consumer, and that's not necessarily the ones that we are currently shopping for. And let me give you an example. When I say it creates a certain brand aura, a certain brand perception, or enhances that brand perception, if you will. Asian Prince had this iconic film in 2007, the ad film Har Ghar Chupchap Se Kehta Hai. Now, in a new avatar, as a 50-second digital film, which has been beautifully stitched together with a montage of shots of how people are currently experiencing home life, it's intended to make people feel a stronger emotional connect that a home has in their lives. So, I think communication is changing, how consumers are interacting with brands, with technology, with news, with their environment is changing. So our environment is essentially what these days? It's our home. Home is a workplace, so we're all digitally adaptive. We're doing the best we can with the digital forum. When it comes to us as consumers, we feel better buying into a brand that we know has been a responsible citizen. When we read, it creates a certain persona for the brand. Now, you could very well be a luxury brand, for instance. You could very well be a Gucci or a Prada, but they've taken the step to make medical face masks. So every little thing is going to add to the tonality of protection and safety, and that's increasingly going to be important. I think the defining moment is going to be for e-commerce and digital, which is really honestly much said and much written about. Because technology has been a great enabler.
Yeah.
And to wrap it up, I'll just say consumers are looking to brands, me certainly, a brand that brings people together, fosters a sense of community, apart from fulfilling the need that I have from that brand.
Yeah. So one very key point that I take from you is that availability over loyalty. Ameer, how do you think about this? How are you learning from this adversity? How is the consumer behavior going to change now?
Okay, so I'll chime in. I think right now, consumer, behavior is dictated a little bit by, the environment and a bit of fear. In this context, there's a little bit of decision paralysis. You don't really want to take decisions about, the future or purchases, etc., except for essential commodities and food, which is essential to keep yourself going. But that's the current context for consumer side. I think when they look at brands, I think I kind of take from what Madhu was saying. Consumers are seeing through fluff. They are call out brands that actually are communicating things without truth. And I think any brand that's actually taking an action with truth and authenticity is actually standing out. An example is, for example, Lifebuoy. They have purpose built into the communication over the years, but they finally actually also took a decision to reduce the prices of the product. And that is a significant action to back communication and well appreciated, by consumers. The last point I'd like to make, is I think when it comes to brand communication that kind of reaches out to allay fears, which can be digitally, delivered in bite-sized formats, that's going to be relevant to consumers to build their confidence to go back out there and engage with these brands.
Yeah. So from where I hear you, it is essentially a consumer is standing at a crossroads between life and livelihood today. And uncertainty and fear is what scares us the most. So I'll come to you now, Minal. And how do you think your brands are dealing with the consumer behavior that is about to change, the uncertainty era that we are entering into?
I think in terms of the most of the points which Ameer and Madhu said, they actually have captured the essence of it. But the one point I would add to it is in terms of the whole conscious living, which we are going to be getting into. I think post COVID also, there's going to be an aspect of, while it's, we feel this is going to have a long-term impact on us in terms of how we are going to be actually buying, how we are going to be consuming things, how the choices that we are going to make also are going to change significantly. So I think from that perspective, conscious living is something important. And to add on to the point of Ameer, what he was mentioning about authenticity, that's a very important aspect of it, because we are flooded with information. I think at this point in time, to be able to break through what is the authentic information you're getting vis-a-vis what is the fluff, is a very difficult scenario, especially during an ambiguous time. So I think brands should start concentrating on the kind of content they are actually creating. What is the backing in terms of authenticity? Who's the expert speaking behind it? I think that may make a lot of difference in terms of the future of communication, at least post-COVID.
Yes. What I hear is authenticity all the way, not just in what you're saying, but also in your actions. Udit, what are your learnings from the point of view of consumers as the end consumer? What are the behavior changes post adversity that you see will change?
So, I will basically talk about, the entire learnings of adversities as a whole, right? So, I have divided this into two parts. One is probably being an entrepreneur, and second is as a professional, right? What have I learned? First and foremost, what I've learned being an entrepreneur is that you can run a PR firm virtually, right? There is no, gone are those days where, you need people sitting at offices and working there. So I think virtually we can run our offices, and that's something which every firm today would be taking forward most probably, because ultimately if you actually look at the cost, or if you look at your P&L, that's around 10 to 12% of the total cost which you incur every year. That's first. The second and the most important is talking to the client. And when I say talking to the client, it doesn't mean that you just have to talk about your business. You need to listen to your client, right? Because clients are in much bigger problems than what we are in right now. The brands, the entire supply chain is disruptive right now, right? So, you look at Olas and Ubers of the world, the entire business model is in a question right now. So I think sometimes it is very important to just talk to the client and understand what is client wanting, right? And tell them, okay, communication is one part, but also talk to them, right? Because they've got other aspects also. The third thing is technology. I think technology has played a very, very vital role, and it will play a pivotal role in the coming years as well. We have seen, right now also we are virtually having this discussion. Normal circumstance, we would have met in an event and discussed about certain things, and there are 100 odd people listening to us. So in the coming years, I think in communication, technology would play a very, very vital role. And if as a firm, I am able to talk about predictive analysis with the client, and I'm able to talk, tell them what is going to happen, and if I can provide if I can provide the solution to it, that is what the clients would be looking for. So, three, four things is what I have learned. And I think that is what I have been talking to my team every day, that, these are most important things which we need to focus as a firm. And, if there is a time to be called from agencies to consultancies, this is the right time. We all have to behave as a consultant and not as agencies now, for sure.
Yeah. For me personally, I have never met anybody from any of you who has behaved as an agency. You all have been consultants from the inception, I believe. I'll come to you, Mukesh. My question to you will be particularly on the lines of how a consumer is going to behave, because that is the most unpredictable scenario that we are in. Needs are changing, wants are changing. How do you think consumers will behave post-COVID or post the lockdown is over?
Resham, so taking cue from what Madhu said, she said that it will be about availability over choice. I think I disagree to this a little. I feel this phenomenon is going to be only for the shock period. Post that, as soon as the e-commerce websites start coming in, as soon as the shops are opened, it's not that if I was driving a particular brand, I am going to buy any car which is available to me. So I think the choice will come back as soon as we are out of this shock period. And that is where the role of communication consultants will come into being. We will have to reinstate the brand loyalty, the brand messaging, and also the product promotion to an extent. So I don't believe that it is for the long run availability over choice. Ultimately, it'll have to be about choice. It'll have to be about the disposable incomes that are in the hands of people. Of course, if the incomes get impacted, it will have a ripple impact. So I see a lot of industries like healthcare, education, insurance, and huge opportunities post-COVID times in them, wherein there are certain industries, probably like travel, hospitality, F&B also to an extent, entertainment, they will take a huge hit and will take a lot of time to come back. But I think it is global, not just India. And we are talking about firms who have stood the test of time and who have made these organizations sailing through the 2008-9 crisis, the 1991 crisis, and many pandemics. So I think we will have to evolve and bring about innovation in bringing about more revenue models. So we are talking of business that have risen against all odds in the past as well in a developing country like India. So I think there is still hope. Of course, it is a short period, but we will evolve. It might take a quarter, 2, 3 quarters, but ultimately it will be about the choice of the consumer.
Right. Thank you for that. Whereas, Rekha, I'll come to you with this. While what Mukesh said makes sense to a larger audience, but I understand that China is the first market that got impacted, and China is now slowly opening up. The consumer behavior there is not as what we had predicted. People are not doing revenge buying, as I said. People are more conscious right now. What is your, because I understand you also work, some of the clients in China, your counterparts are in China. What is your view on the consumer behavior if we were to extrapolate that from that country to ours?
So I think as Zeno, we did two things. The minute COVID started, we of course had our China office as our go-to learnings office, and all of us know that with Wuhan starting off as the epicenter of the epidemic, and then for it to now come back to work over a period of the next about 5 months now, it's a fantastic live example of probably what brands and what companies are doing in that location and around the worst hit areas of China with regards to how they're trying to get and woo their consumers back. One of the things that we did early on in Zeno Group was to map the mind shifts that basically people are having with regards to the situation of COVID. So we looked very closely at China and saw that when with regards to a lot of the data and analytics that we did around consumer sentiments, we realized that like how there are 5 stages of grief, there also seemed to be like 5 stages of reactions to COVID. It starts with the entire thing about where consumers started off feeling this entire denial first, and there was defiance, and it was all about the fact that hey, kisi aur ko ho sakta hai, humko nahi ho sakta hai. Typical, and that's a behavior which was not really about it being an Indian behavior, but I think typically that's the kind of behavior which has happened, across the different countries where people tried to say or show that they were stronger than the disease, and they went out to do things in communities when the governments were actually telling them not to do it. From there, I think the second stage which we observed, which happened in China, was about the whole thing about fear and depression, because that's when reality hit and people started believing that yes, it was here and it was probably here to stay. Nobody knew where the bottom of the pit was, and everybody was concerned about stocking up and whether they had enough supplies to go by, whether there was enough food for the family to eat. So there were a lot of these concerns which came in the second stage, and therefore there was a different tonality which at that point of time brands or companies needed to apply. And that's the same for India right now, where there are certain pockets and states where the fear and depression seems to be higher, because we're also doing a country-wise mapping, and we know that currently India is in a fear and depression stage. Similarly, the third stage which happened to China was acceptance, which was when finally people said that okay, fine, if this is how life is going to be, then they started doing things differently, or they started being more responsible as citizens, and they actually went on to probably abide by the rules, and also then help out the neighbors and community in whatever manner that they could. And then it went into the whole bit about compassion and creativity, where people went out and tried to help out the ones which were in need beyond themselves. And finally, it was resurgence, which is what we've seen, Wuhan come to. So yes, there were certain things that people predicted that probably when the resurgence happened, maybe, people are actually going to be coming back and shopping like crazy, because it's all about that vengeance of not having access to markets earlier. But somewhere, I think that behavior turned out to be a little more responsible, and probably it's a learning for us that also in India, and traditionally, I think India has been a market where we have emphasized on values like savings. We have emphasized on values like chadar utni hi phailao jitne aapke paas औकात होती है. And these are things which are our everyday conversations, which are what our parents and our grandparents have been kind of putting into our heads. And suddenly the millennials realize that yes, probably health is important, probably savings are important, maybe to prioritize and secure a better future is probably it does matter, rather than just splurging all the money that you have on what you're doing. So there is a certain shift also probably that can happen, and probably which we can see after we start normalizing. We'll see whether it is there to stay or it is just a short term reaction to fear that has happened. But maybe there will be a resurgence of that, in that sense of certain old values, where people will give some amount of respect to what we started taking for granted over probably the last decade or so. And that could also mean that how will now brands then communicate to people? What is the kind of a priority? Like, for example, we one of our clients happens to be Hero Electric. Now, when we're talking about EV in context of a situation like this, today when everybody speaks about great environment and cleaner air and cleaner skies to look at, one of the bigger things is also that for COVID, which is a respiratory linked disease, it's also about having strong lungs and cleaner lungs. So then, if we're looking at communicating about the vehicle, am I still selling transportation, or am I going to be selling a better quality of life? Am I going to be selling cleaner air? Am I going to be selling a healthier future for your children? So I guess the communication which brands will then do in context of how the behaviors change would also then obviously reflect that in terms of the kind of messages that are given out. So
Right.
this is my bit.
No, but that is brilliant. You have given us the 5 stages, and we relate to it because we are in one of the stages. You also bring out a very important point. Ameer, I'll come to you with this, that the needs of the clients, just like Rekha mentioned, are also evolving. The clients want to be seen better. They want to get the message that is more authentic better. Can you also give us some examples of innovations in Marcom or communications that you are seeing that we can take back as a learning in this current adverse environment that we are in?
Sorry, I didn't quite hear your question.
No, Rekha was mentioning about how brands are evolving and they're not just selling a product now. She gave an example of an electric vehicle where they said that it is not just about selling the vehicle right now, but it is also about the quality of life that they'll be selling. So my question to you is that in the recent past, are you observing these trends with a number of your clients or any brands that you're observing where the communication has gone just from from selling a product to a quality of life? If you can share some innovation examples with us or throw some light on this aspect.
I think the brand promise that certain brands have been evangelizing over a period of time is something that they have been doing over a long time.
Yes.
I think what I'm seeing is innovation in the space of safety, the messages of safety. Like Itihad, one of our clients, has done a return to the runway 2-minute video, which showcases the initiatives around what they're doing to keep the aircraft safe, so that when people try and fly again, they are doing it well. So those are the examples that I'm seeing that are far more relevant and impactful in today's context.
Minal, do you have to add a point here on the examples that we're talking about?
So with us actually working largely more with B2B tech companies, I feel what has happened is there are certain companies which were kind of really going at a survival stage. So we were concentrating our communication also on those lines. But this pause in some ways have actually kind of given a rebirth to the areas of innovation of products and a lot of platforms of technology, which has started to create quite an interest. And I think that's where things are going to move forward, at least the way I see it in the portfolio of clients we handle. tech integration is becoming quite important. And I think I'm talking not only a perspective of digital transformation, but also how, as communication experts, how we are going to be depending on tools of integration. There are several tools for research. There are several tools which have been there in the business for a long time. I think our dependencies have not still been as much on them. I think that's going to be a nature of progression, which I see from a communication point of view. But from a client point of view, we have started to kind of talk about various aspects of parallel service lines, which needs to be customized and be prepared for the future. That is something going to be quite a aspect of communication for us. Yeah.
Right. Mukesh, I believe you have a point.
Yeah, so Resham, I was saying, taking cue from what Rekha said, I think I absolutely agree with it. Though, if you see, communication has always been about what the consumer is thinking. So, if supposedly I have to sell a luxury car, I might sell it on speed and features to myself, on probably safety to my parents, on probably design to my sister. So it has always been about what the consumer is thinking, feeling at that particular point. So post COVID, we will need to understand that people are a little scared about their health. People are a little scared about the economy downturn. So probably we will just have to think about these parameters and be cognizant about these things when we are designing our communication approaches for any of our clients and even for our organizations. So I think if I just sum it in a single line, we will just have to move away from painting a rosy picture to holding a mirror in our hands.
That's very well put. That also brings me, Madhu, do you have a point to add here? I believe you have, because you're working with a diverse portfolio of clients.
Yes, I mean, I think most of the points have been well covered. It's only now adding to the examples. So, brands and the activities that they're doing will leave a lasting impression. Whether it is about the new hygiene standards, and let's talk about the things that are now everyday and will continue to be. Food, for instance, the new hygiene protocols that have been introduced, safety and hygiene protocols, they were introduced for a particular purpose in the time, say a zero contact delivery by someone like a Domino's. I think they're going to stay forever and be an expectation. Those elevated levels of hygiene are just going to be a normal expectation by everybody. So that's,
Right. Right. You're bang on that. Udit, do you have a quick point to add on this?
But Resham, if I can, I think none of us have spoken. When we spoke about consumer mindset, we've sort of stayed a lot with the industries which have been, the ones we represent. There are certain industries in which the consumer's life is going to be totally changed.
Right.
Will we look at tourism? How will we look at tourism? How will we look at travel? I was reading that we don't represent an airline, but when you travel today, you're going to have to get a test done. The flight crew is going to be wearing their PPE kits of certain caliber. They're going to have to leave certain number of seats open, which just means probably more expensive airfares. So it is going to play out for a bit differently. And I don't know how far we can say normal will return. I'd like to believe that we will reclaim some part of our life. And I think some parts of it are going to change forever. And I think digital adoption, like somebody spoke of, I think Udit mentioned that, how he's running an agency, which he didn't think he would. We're all running our offices and contributing. Earlier, we would have to go to client meetings for reviews. Let's meet for the review. Today, people are so comfortable discussing prices. We're all dealing with crisis plans, which are being made in real time. And I think everyone's coping fine. So there's a lot that's changed, and I think a lot let it stay.
And I think just to add to it, what Madhu was talking about technology, and I think what we are forgetting is that with technology, the theft of data also comes in, right?
Yes,
we will be discussing crisis over the panel and discussing confidential information. Our legal systems have to keep abreast with what is happening, because the contracts needs to be designed accordingly. So that is one of the challenges, I think, which as firms we would facing, and clients also, right? Brands are very conscious about sharing the confidential information. So I think as firms, now is the time to probably look at legal as a very, very serious thing and start investing heavily in two things. One is technology as well as the legal thing as well.
Right. Thank you, Udit, for that. You bring a very prominent point, because up till last year, technology was also undergoing a crisis. And I've said it over and over again to multiple people and also to you all, that until last year, we were not too sure of how technology will play out, social permissions with the various scandals that have happened. And I think this question will again come up. But I'll bring the conversation back a little bit to the communication and adversity. So in crisis communication, we're often taught, and some of the leaders that I admire have always been telling me, in times of crisis, communicate, communicate, communicate. Now, my question to all of you leaders is that how much is too much of communication? From where I stand, I have understood 10 into 10 into 10 model, that if 10 times you communicate a thing, 10% of people will retain 10% of information. Now, can you guide us a little through the communication piece? And Rekha, I'll start with you on this. Can you tell us how much is too much communication, and what are certain guidelines as communicators we should follow?
So I think specifically to the situation that we have today, a lot of the information is repeat information for consumers, whether it is brands who are talking to them, whether it is the mailers that they're getting from their bankers or from any other partner that they deal with, or it is their friends, or it is the news people, or if they go onto the Twitter or any other channel. There's just such an overload of the same thing. I mean, so for example, Ameer spoke about Lifebuoy and hand wash, and I think fantastic brand relevance, and also to what the need is. But imagine today, after it's almost 45 days into the into us being into a lockdown, and if people are still going to talk about the importance of hand hygiene and washing hands with soap and water continuously even now, that's a communication that has been told to them in the first 10 days by everybody. And at this point of time, I think what the brand is doing is brilliant, because in terms of how they've evolved the communication, they've moved away from the basic. Although they're saying it, they're also trying to say it in new different ways and engaging new different consumers. So I guess unless brands realize that there's not much that we can change about what we can talk about in a particular situation, because all of us have faced it for the first time. The brand doesn't know. As advisors, even we don't know exactly, okay, what is the right thing to say or how much to say. So we are all following cues and we're learning from each other. And as we do that, it's about how interestingly can it be packaged, how sensitively can it be packaged, and how relevantly can it be packaged. And I think that is the importance of how we send out the communication at this point of time. One thing which I think is a surprise is a lot of people are not used to so much of internal communication. So suddenly our companies are talking a lot more to us than they ever did in our entire work life. Suddenly, we are having our colleagues reach out to us in multiple ways, checking on us. And all of that adds to the volume. And at the same time, again, when if I go back to the whole thing of being in fear and depression, at that stage, I think what we need is reassurance. What we need is, a hope that things are not going to be like this forever. So therefore, is it about reinforcing the fear, or is it about elevating it and saying, oh fine, let's just be responsible and do things, and we are a community and we'll all be in it together. So the what kind and where and when is, I think, a very important aspect of the how much.
Right. Ameer, would you have anything to add to what was just said by Rekha?
Yes, absolutely. I think when you look at the dynamics of what's going on and the the various unknowns, it's a little unnerving. I think the basis of what is said to certain audiences needs to be underlaid with a sense of calm confidence. I think that's the first principle that we advise our clients, and in fact we've been facing it in our own management meetings, where sometimes there's a diversity of opinion, and you've got to discuss and take care of all kinds of implications, including health and wellness of employees, different dynamics of work processes, etc. And you've got to do this with empathy and clear communication. Your earlier point in terms of is it wrong to over communicate, because the principle that you heard is communicate. I don't think so. I think you need to do it as often as necessary when you have things to say, but it needs to be done clearly, transparently, and as often as required.
Right.
Not forcing it into some sort of a regime of communication which is overdone. So I think
Right.
those are the basic tenets of what I believe makes it real and makes it
Right.
authentic in terms of communication.
Okay.
I
Mukesh,
come
do you have
here.
something to add to this?
Yeah, Resham. So I think I completely agree with Rekha and Ameer both. Communication till the time you have something substantial to say or reach out to the consumer, you should say. There is nothing about too much communication or too less communication. It is about what I as a brand have to say, and if it is making sense for the consumer in the overall scheme of things. If during COVID I start selling something which is absolutely absurd and not necessary, it will have a backlash. But if it is something which is making sense with the consumer, I think we should go all out and communicate like you rightly mentioned. So there is nothing we should be cognizant of here. I think it is about the right messaging, not about the quantity of the communication.
Okay. Madhu, with you, can I also add to the question about internal communication to your own employees? While Mukesh, Amir, and Rekha have mentioned it ample times about outside, and I'm pretty clear on that. Can you also add another leg to the question about internal communication to your own employees to the question?
Yes. So I think I agree with my, agree with the panelists that you have to factor in. For me, it's just like the customer, the audience, our internal people are customers, they are stakeholders. So you have to sense the need of that audience, the audience sentiment, and be able to communicate in that flavor and to that tenor, as opposed to too much communication. I think for us, what has changed is while there is a good feel communication that is coming in as a healthy rhythm of internal communication, then I must say that as part of Madison world is well managed and part of that rhythm, and not necessarily that of the PR firm. But at the agency, I think what we've done is we've made shorter chains of command, greater decisiveness and agility, which just means that we don't have to keep going back to each other and talking about a lot of things. You cut that, the forced need for communication. It is not necessarily only meant as a good feel factor that let's have this team meeting, let's have a team connect every Wednesday, every whatever. While there is a healthy rhythm, I think there's a balance we've tried to achieve by giving a greater leeway to a lot of the team members, and with some amazing results. I think we've seen a lot of people stand up and deliver so well, which might not have happened in other times, and it's been a wonderful learning.
Right. Mukesh, I'll come back to you, but Minal, you have a point to add to this?
Yeah, certainly. I think the area which I'm going to basically talk about from a crisis perspective is the crisis preparedness. I have had the opportunity to work with a lot of startups, and in situations like this, I think it kind of affects extremely adversely, because there's an aspect of business continuity which is also not there in some cases. So I think from communication perspective, we need to kind of become that anchor of being able to think of scenarios and think of areas which we should be actually talking about. So crisis preparedness for certain sectors is going to become quite an important factor, something which we should leverage on, because we understand businesses quite at a deep-rooted level. And the second part is while I've handled crisis communication pretty much most part of my career, I've realized that yes, there was a time of continuously talking about and communicating, but I think currently, if I have to really say, it's about listening and sharing, and that's what has become much more important from an internal and external perspective.
Right. Udit, would you add something to the listening and sharing that Minal just mentioned?
Yeah, so I think whatever my co-panelists have talked about, they have pretty much covered everything in this. And just to add to it, as a firm, we work with a lot of startups and SMEs, right? And communication, I think, varies branch to branch. Currently, it will also vary, sector-wise, right? So, for example, if I'm working with a startup, their entire objective was to raise funds. So that still remains one of the objectives. So, you have to you will have to communicate like that, right? If a startup wants to raise funds, then we are communicating and making sure that he's present in different financials and media. So I don't want to get into the micro level of it, but then communication has to play a vital role, and it will go on. Nothing is going to stop. Yes, we have faced this pandemic. There would be a problem for 3-6 months, but there are brands who have been there from 40 years. There are brands who have been there from 50 years. We can't expect that those brands to fall flat on their faces within, if this pandemic has come up. We should be prepared for any sort of problems. Yes, there are corporate, as a business model, there would be some changes. The brands would do it. And if they make the changes, then communication even becomes more important, right? You have to communicate with your stakeholders. So during the COVID or post-COVID, you will have to communicate. Therefore, I say PR and communication, very, very vital in this circumstance as well.
Absolutely. Mukesh, if you have a point, we'll quickly wrap up the internal comms question and move to next.
Risham, I was saying, as business leaders, we generally go through a lot of phases on a daily basis, which we may or may not share with our teams, but they are very important as an organization for us to go through. So right now, I think it is equally important to be absolutely transparent to an extent with our team members as well, because this is not a pandemic which is going away in 2 months. The impact will last at least a year or more. So there might be certain drastic decisions that we as business leaders might have to take. Though I personally am an optimistic person and I believe we'll sail through. But still, there might be some hard-hitting decisions that we might have to take for our own organizations also. So being transparent is the way to be. Also, one last point. I think Rekha brushed on it a little, but it is the most important point right now. We've been talking about the business impact, the consumer behavior, top line, bottom line, but I think mental line would be the most important point right now. If you see the 2008 and 9 crisis in United Nations, in USA, the suicide rates because of the economic downturn were risen by 13 to 15%. So I think because we are gunning ho about the technology and working from home and trying to avoid human connect, it will have a lot of impact on our mental health, which as organizations and as a country on the whole, we'll really have to look into.
Right. We have over 115 people who are live watching us right now as participants, and there are other people on different platforms as well. Please feel free to drop your questions, and a question related to the topic that we are talking, and any one of you can answer the question. It's from Shreya. It says, on balancing the right amount of communications, are there any sectors where regular communications is more essential than others? Anyone can please.
I think, honestly, I think it can't be sector. It's not sector, but situational, I'd say. So really not sector specific, situational. And since we were speaking about internal communications, I'll take an example from that. While there is the bit about mental health, while there is the bit about retaining empathy, transparent communication, keeping the warmth amongst teams and colleagues alive, the trust, keeping the trust of the brand, that it's not one face that they're showing me today and tomorrow God knows what I'm going to hear. I think that us reinforcing the trust has not got to be only dialogue. It's got to be more than that. And that what I mean is it's communication in multiple manners, in multiple formats. So really, I think it's situational and not really a sector. And I just chose to take internal as an example because we were speaking about it.
Okay. While there are a couple of questions coming in, please keep sending those. We'll come back to them a little while later. One of the things that we're observing right now is while print newspapers, the physical copies are not reaching in most of our homes, digital consumption is at an all-time high. While in tier 1 cities, we're adjusting to it pretty well. In tier 2, tier 3 regional newspapers still have to be on a high. Most of our parents who are in tier 2 cities, they still read and wait for the print copy of it. Now, my question to you is, do you think the regional media that we do you do for your clients and we do for our brands, when will it recover and what is the path and your learning on this thing? Probably Ameer, we'll start with you.
Resham, I don't think so. You were audible towards the end, so we don't know who have you addressed that question.
Okay, anyone can address. Ameer, we'll start with you about the regional media bit, especially in tier 2, tier 3 cities. What do you think is the future of regional media?
So I don't know specifically about just the regional media consumption patterns in tier 2, tier 3 for print media, but I think I have a view on the overall, canvas of media. I mean, we were the only country on the planet where we actually saw a rise in, print media at the same time as television, at the same time as digital. I think this situation is going to drastically change that landscape. People's habits, which tend to kind of, permeate from cities and then go to, towns and villages and so on, is fueled by two dynamics. One is everybody today is connected with, smartphones and so on. That penetration has gone pretty deep. The second is, that behavior change is forced on you now. So at some level, consumption through digital channels and devices and so on is going to be more of the new normal than before.
Okay. Mukesh, do you have a point on the same?
Yeah, Resham. I mean, we majorly operate in tier 2 and tier 3 towns. So I think a digital transition was already happening. It's just that the COVID scenario has given it an acceleration. But I firmly believe that people are accustomed to know global, macro, and micro, all three perspectives and news. So I would want to know what is happening in my city, my country, and globally. Then when we go on smartphones and digital channels, the authentic information remains an issue. So authentic channels of information will never die. So all these publication houses that we are talking about, they have been in the business for so long. Yes, they will have to probably turn around their working modules, the business models. They might have to go digital. We might have to shift from readership, circulation to viewership, and accordingly the advertising modules will also shift. But as far as authentic information and communication goes, I think it will sustain.
Okay. I'll quickly take a question in between. It is from Bani Krishna. It says, do you think that the PR outreach needs to be more targeted and relevant than ever before in the future days? And how do we start that? Anyone can please take the question.
I think, Resham, it's a two-edged sword right now. Nobody knows. I mean, right now, in terms of communication, I think everybody is firing in the dark. So you know that people are sitting in their homes and accessing OTT platforms and digital smartphones. But as soon as things start to improve, of course, newspapers will come into being. So targeted, of course, it purely depends on your brand. But majorly, if it is a mass brand like an FMCG product, you will have to go mass.
Right.
We were always doing targeted communication, right, for our brands. So it's not going to change. It's going to be same. I think it is going to become more targeted now because brands will be more conscious to get the stakeholders' eyeballs, right? So I think it will become more targeted in the coming days.
So
if I can come in here, I think with when we're speaking digital, we're also speaking analytics, which has already been, has been on the rise, and probably times like these have just made the importance of analytics that much more. I hear from clients how they suddenly realize there's a situation for which they don't have data for consumer behavior, consumer buying pattern. Those who are large and are well organized are able to, they have their very large captive base from which they're able to draw on insights and able to predict for a week and a month. But really, that's how far the visibility is going, even for very, very large FMCGs, that we've had conversations with. So it's got to, I agree that it's already targeted and it'll probably just get more so.
Okay. I'll pick another question from Achal Paul. Do you think post-COVID future is only of a digital PR agency, or there is still potential of a traditional PR to be around? Minal, I'll start with you on that. I haven't heard you speak in a while.
No, I think the lines have blurred. There is nothing like traditional or digital. We all have kind of learned that as we have gone. But I do feel with Ideosphere, I have learned, that, I think we're getting into a stage where we're going to become the real consultants, the real advisors. And it's not going to be, as you quoted correctly, we are partners, with our clients. So from
Right.
consultant perspective also, I feel we're getting more and more entrenched into every stage of the business, which is quite interesting. It's quite exciting. So from a medium point of view, I don't feel there is going to be I think we're going to merge in that sense. Rather, I would go to the extent of saying even advertising to that extent is going to merge with us. So I don't see a difference really.
Okay. Okay.
I think
Rekha.
yes. So I think as long as there is two parts to our country, which is one as the Bharat and one as the India part, there will always be both of these sides, which will be a critical part of communication. We cannot really say that only one thrives or one rules over the other, because we are a mixed set of people and audience. The way we and that also segues back into your that also actually goes back into your previous question, which is the whole thing about print media. So print, while there are people who are already used to print, so one, for the people who've been on print for 2 decades, 3 decades, print is a matter of habit. So
Right.
therefore, once the papers start, I will want my favorite newspaper to start the morning with a cup of tea, because I don't want to give that habit up. It's been with me for 40 years of my life. For the other lot, which is the millennials, they were anyway not reading, because the guys who were even in PR, where reading is such a critical part of your job, you have to enforce it on people to read the morning newspaper, because they believe that just looking at Twitter and Facebook and Instagram is a great way to catch up on what's happening in the world. So
Right.
there is that audience already sitting there. But then there is also a huge amount of people who have probably the first time they've been educated. This is the first graduate of their family, or the first 12th pass of the family, and the newspaper is a symbol of having arrived in life. Because when the newspaper comes to your doorstep, it's also their matter of pride that they're showing off, to say that I have somebody in my house who can read a newspaper. So that pride is never going to go away. So then all the regional newspapers and all the language publications, the reason that they grow at a higher rate than English publications is just that the minute people start getting more literate, they want to have their favorite newspaper. And as long as the traditional, like I said, the Bharat and India coexist, and that's going to be for a pretty long time in this country. It's not going to be only about digital agencies or digital PR or PR. I think it's about great ideas and platform agnostic ideas, which will be the base, and they will rule the world. The minute we have a great idea, it doesn't matter whether it's traditional, digital, all of that is just a medium of communication.
Right.
Resham,
Ameer, yeah, please, Madhu.
can I interrupt and add? So this is from a real
Sure.
life, this is from a conversation, taking from Rekha's point of there is Bharat and there is India. So we've all been sending out communications, and a large part of ours is well within what we'd like to call India. So in the tier 2, tier 3, and these cities, when I have had conversations with people saying, paper aa raha hai, are you, is it being distributed? Please tell me, with our associates and partners, to understand the lay of the land, and who am I sending this to? Should I be communicating differently? What I'm hearing is that yes, a large number of cities do have the distribution. It's if a paper is printed in a city, it's getting distributed to the nearby ones. But where it's got to travel across borders, then there is a challenge, and that's probably a short-term challenge. We'd like to believe, till the situation changes. And then they say that newspapers, print versus digital dialogue. That print is here to stay. And while there is the digital format that these very same a number of regionals are already sharing, but families this is the print version is liked to be read by more than one person, unlike, say, for example, a major city like a Delhi or Mumbai, where a certain person gets an Economic Times on his or her table. He says here it's a norm for multiple people to read that paper, so it will be looked forward to and will still keep coming.
Right. I have a wonderful question from somebody who's not mentioned the name. They're anonymous, but they've said that have clients become more responsive now in adopting the radical approaches which earlier they did not? And I'll add to this part asking that, do you think that CEOs or different business leaders communicate better during adversity? What is your view on that? Ameer, what is your take on this?
Your first question first. Are clients kind of open to ideation, etc.? I think absolutely. I think clients are looking for ways and means to continue to be engaged, and they are far more open to creative ideation than under normal circumstances where they're busy doing other things. So,
Right.
so so we've at the group level, at the low Lintas group level, we've got a creative group that is actually kind of thinking through and churning out ideas on an ongoing basis that are bite size, or they've got the ability to go viral, or they've got purpose at the core. So we're doing this on an ongoing basis as a team. And I think that's a relevant piece. I forgot your second question actually.
No, my question was, do you think that CEOs and different vertical heads communicate better during adversity? Does adversity really bring us all together, and we blur the boundaries that we've created in our heads about an organization altogether?
Does it bring people together? I think yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm connecting with my teams and teams across the agency. This morning we have an internal program called Like a Boss, where senior leaders actually engage with junior colleagues, and for the first time I engage with people cross functionally across different business units in the group. So about 40 youngsters that we engage with. So are we doing it better? Yes, I think we are. We're doing it virtually. We're doing it better. Your other part of the question was, do leaders communicate well?
Yeah.
It's a mixed bag, to be honest. Some do, some don't.
Yeah, really. Anybody who wants to have a dig on the question, because I'm really interested to know this, because I'm personally seeing a change in the way the communication is flowing across industries. Anybody who would want to have a take on this?
So now I think we are communicating more. Some of it is a conscious decision, because we are in these times and we haven't seen each other. I think that just makes you have certain structured conversations as well as certain casual outreaches, like I think Ameer gave the example of, small groups. I certainly am learning more about my colleagues, lives a little more than I might have known them earlier, which is a very pleasant side to all of this.
Right.
So the short answer to your question is that I think, yes, we are communicating more. Is it effective? I don't know. I'd love to hear feedback from the teams. But I still think there is value in being able to meet each other, which we look forward to.
Okay. I also had a question on these lines, and
Rakshita
Goswami. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just adding one point and then you can go with your question. I think what Madhu was saying is right, absolutely right. Because, personally speaking, I'm amazed with the amount of maturity mid-level people and junior people. And when I talk about junior, I'm talking about account executives, senior account executive had shown in this pandemic. Yesterday I was reading a mail and there were some creative ideas which these guys were pouring in, right? And I think, and I was talking to them in a normal day, while I would be always busy going out for meetings and getting clients on board and all those things and managing crisis for the clients, we will not talk to them. But now I am connecting with them and understanding they've got huge potential, right? And they are coming out with certain ideas which I have never thought of, and which is really, they are running campaigns on it, and clients are very happy seeing the results of it. So I think absolutely we communicating, mid-level people have started communicating very well now. So I agree to what Madhu was saying.
Well, Udit, you're creating leaders in the making, and we are very happy that you're doing that. So the question that Rakshita Goswami has asked is, media is mostly occupied with the information on pandemic, and or their developments, announcements from the government, business updates. So how are you adding value to your clients? And I will simplify that question to the extent that most of the times we are at a stage where a tsunami of COVID development has hit us. How do we make our brands more visible during this time? Is it only via CSR, or there are other things we can do? Mukesh, I'll start with you.
Sure. So Resham, I'll just sum it up in a line, I think, and would
Brilliant.
let others dig in. I think for me, the communication has shifted from 3Ps to 3H. So earlier it was about position, power, and prosperity, any communication majorly that we were doing for any of the brands. And now it is 3H, which is hope, health, and happiness. So till the
Brilliant.
time I can touch upon these three H's, I think the communication makes sense in the COVID period. But the moment it starts blurring the lines with the three P's of position, power, and prosperity, I think we should hold on to it for a bit.
Okay. Okay. Rekha, would you add something to this?
So I think if brands have something to say which is relevant at this point of time with regards to what is being sought after, then go ahead and say it. But otherwise, if you're just trying to peddle, a product, or you're just trying to peddle that donation that you gave for, whatever 10,000 masks or 25,000 sanitizers, please don't do it, because if you've done that in the spirit of doing some good to the society. And I don't think this is the time to talk about it, because it's an essential and people need it. But if you've done something, for example, certain brands have the power to leverage the power of the community. So if there is something that you've done where you've leveraged the power of community to address, issues, or to address loneliness, or to address any other thing, which, some of us discussed as, some time back, mental health, etc., then I guess that's relevant, because you're really doing something which is of use to people, and which is out of the sync of you selling your product. So if you have
Right.
something to say which is in the sync of what is needed at this hour, please say it. Otherwise, don't say anything right now. It is better that you act and keep doing your, you may call it philanthropy, but if it's good for now, just keep it. You don't have to talk about everything that you do.
Yeah.
A philanthropy brings me to an important question that is related only to consultancies, that Amit Kumar has just asked, that with cuts in the A&M budget, reduction in spend, especially by the brands, is it fair for clients to ask for alteration in the scope of work and ask for reduction on retainers? I think this is the hot topic that I wanted to save the best for the last. Thank you, Amit, for the question. Anybody can answer this question. I think all of you have important points to add to it. Udit, you are saying something.
Yeah, so I will go first. I think rather than clients asking us for the cuts, we should go to them and say that, okay, we understand this position. We understand that you as a brand are going through a tough time, and so are we. We are all in this together. Let's come out and restructure our scope. Having said that, I'm not saying that we have to minimize our work. No, we have to do more work. Well, they might cut your retainers. That is okay, because this is the time to stand with your client and actually do more work than what we were doing. This is not the time to say, hang on, we didn't have this in our scope, we will charge extra. No, this is not that time. This is the time we will make money in the coming times. This is the time for the business continuity for both as a firm and as well as the client side. So I think we have done that. We have opted for deferred payments. We have taken few cuts in our retainers, and we have restructured our teams accordingly as well. I think we are intelligent enough to restructure the teams as well. So I think we should be, having said that, coming to the thing is, we are ready to take any cuts if it is in the business continuity. Yeah.
Absolutely. Minal, do you want to add something to this? I saw you smiling wide. So I know you have something to say.
No. I think what Udit said was actually quite bang on. I think at this point in time, it's not only about knowing your internal team members, but I've started to actually connect with the clients also at a very personal level, which is quite nice to see. And they understand us more, and you want to kind of anchor that relationship for a long sustained period. So from that perspective, you just need to stand with them. They also understand you have a business to run, and I think that's been a very good it's a pleasure to see that they understand when you have a business to run, which was generally not the case in the earlier scenario, and they understand how you're actually kind of progressing. But what I really wanted to add to your point was, while of course from I think Mukesh kind of said it very well from an external point of view, but I also feel it's a very good time of introspecting in terms of the areas you would want to really highlight in terms of depth. We've done a lot of white papers, we've done a lot of reports at this point in time, and that's given us, because of time, we have been able to do so. So I think it's allowing you to kind of diversify your service line from not being just external media digital heavy, but also internal customers and B2B communication and not through media only, but through other mediums, which I think is very interesting at this point in time.
Okay. I have one question before we wind up that I would like to take. It is from KS Narahari that says that, will business schools teaching communications need to change their curriculum to impact specific skills? that are needed to take on the digital transformation post-COVID era. What is your take on it, Madhu? Do you have something to add to this?
Sorry, I'm going to ask you to repeat that one for me. I
Sure.
was distracted for a minute. Yes.
The question just disappeared from my screen. So, but the question essentially was that, do you think the schools that are teaching communications, will the curriculum also need to change? Or will it need to go more digital? What is your take on that post the COVID era?
This is a question for Amit and Hemant, which you're getting me to answer.
It is a question from them, and this is a question they want us to answer. So.
Okay, so no, I definitely think it is, because in fact, when when we were talking about business and how businesses will change, one of the major things is education. So tier 2, tier 3 cities, and I'm digressing a little from the question, will already see an impact on schools having to go and incorporate a little bit more of digital. But coming back to communications, I think there have been some there should be a change in the curriculum, or rather an addition to the curriculum, if I could add it, because not a change. I think this was a sudden crisis that has come upon everybody. How did brands deal? What were winners? How did we cope with it? What are the new tools? We've all sort of figured out new ways of doing things, and some of these are going to last. And let me give you an example. So Tata Power Solar is a client, and we all do our roundtables, our seminars, meetings. So we hosted a roundtable, which typically in other times would have been from the city the client is based in, unless you fly across a journalist from another. This time, because we did it virtually, we were able to get people to come in, relevant media to join from 3 cities. It went off very well, I think, to the high satisfaction of the client, and I think the media that participated. So this was the first time we used it, and if I understand correctly from my client, it's the first time that it's been used in their group of companies. We've never tried this. So there will be several such examples that will come forward, I think, which will be interesting case studies to add to the layer of learning.
Right.
And the whole conversation about purpose communication. Is it important? Is it important only in the short term? Does it does it have an impact on the long term? I think we learn a lot more about consumer sentiments, how brands have done, not just now, but in the months that go ahead. So out of this, I'm sure it will go on to impact the curriculum.
Right. We're very mindful of the fact that we've run out of time, and I'm going to wrap this up quickly. If all of my wonderful panelists can give me quickly top 2 advices when you are dealing in adversity, what are your top 2 learnings that we should all be mindful of, irrespective if we are clients or we are brands? What are your top 2 learnings? And I will start with anybody can quickly pick this up, please. Rekha?
I think one, hope. I think that's at the center of everything that we do. Nothing lasts forever, and therefore I think that's the biggest approach to whatever we do in this time, that it's not going to last. So let's just stick it up, and stick together and get through to this, get through the situation. The second is the spirit of partnership. The spirit of partnership is multiple. It's not just about us as an agency and a client. It's about us as a mentor and a mentee, as a employer and an employee. It is a multiple relationship, as a resource, which is an external resource, which is giving us whatever services to us. So it's a multiple partnerships that we should be cognizant of and respect that spirit of partnership. And I think for me, these are the 2 big words. Yes.
So for Rekha, it's hope and partnership. Minal, I'm coming to you. What are the top 2 advices that we can take from you?
Agility of mind. I think at this point in time, that's the most critical. You've been habituated to do certain things in certain ways. That's completely kind of changed in the current situation. So agility of mind is one. And the way I actually like to say it is, segregate your good to have and must to have. And I think if that can be done, it is quite a clear understanding of what's important.
Absolutely. Wonderfully said. Mukesh, I'm coming to you now.
Yeah, so Risham, I think for me, it will be adaptation. being ready to adapt to new scenarios, because nobody knows what lies in the future, at least in the near future. But yet being optimistic, because as Rekha said, things will pass, nothing lasts, and not nor will this. And second would be compassion, be it internal, external, and also towards yourself, your own mental health. I think being compassionate towards yourself and taking care of your internal teams and your external partners is a
Right.
must. Yeah, optimism, adaptation, and compassion.
Brilliant. Udit, what is your take?
My only advice is keep breathing. This is the most important time, and fight it out. If you actually can. Second, which I usually talk to my people and my team, is this is the right time to upgrade your skills, which we have missed during our conversation.
Right.
I don't want to elaborate on it. Right time to upgrade your skills, because PR is not going to be same what it was 45 days back, and we have already seen that during the COVID times as well.
Absolutely. Update. After communicate. Madhu, quickly, if you can give us.
I think pretty much has been said, but really to me, adaptability is key to survival and to surviving and thriving. Both, you need to learn, you need to adapt, and you need to grow in the environment that we're getting. And to add to that, I will say keep the hope, because along with that comes a lot of positivity and good ideas.
Absolutely. And last but not the least, Ameer.
I think this time is a gift. I think we really need to reimagine everything. I think that's the biggest thing we can do, to take time to rediscover and reimagine everything, including the agency model, and that's it. And I think stay focused on what you do and the relevance of what you deliver to clients and colleagues and so on, and keep it going with conviction.
Right. Thank you for all of your time. And before I hand it over to Hemant, the beauty of such webinars is that the truth that you have said is your own version of truth. And now it will go through multiple trial layers in all of the audience and the participants' mind. And there's nothing more beautiful than that. Thank you, Hemant. Thank you, Amit, for giving us an opportunity to get together. Over to you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Resham, for guiding this incredibly insightful conversation. And thanks to all the panelists as well for taking the time for this. We are grateful that we got a chance to host this conversation, and we want to thank the attendees as well who participated in this webinar, and I'm sure they took away some valuable insights as well. This will be live on our YouTube channel tomorrow. If you feel like watching it again or want to share it with anybody else, we host these conversations every Wednesday evening, and our next webinar is on discussing the new normal amidst what's going on. We will host Babita Barua of WPP GTP, Barun Jha of PTI, Dilip Cherian of Perfect Relations, and Reema Kundnani of Oberoi Realty. This conversation will be moderated by communications specialist Rajeshri Sen. You can go to our Twitter page and find out the link to sign up there. And with that, I want to thank all of you once again for joining, and I hope we will see you all next week as well. Thank you.
Thank you. This was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.